16 concludes in the Karen Reed trial. Today we had the continued cross-examination of Jennifer McCabe and some redirect and recross. And then we had some testimony from Carrie Roberts, Laura Sullivan, and Marietta Sullivan. And I believe that tomorrow is going to be off, but on Friday we're going to be hearing from Brian Higgins. So that's going to be very interesting, certainly worthwhile watching Friday. And if you can't watch it Friday, well, at least you should tune in to my recap on what's going to happen on Friday. So let's first jump into Jennifer McCabe. So Jennifer McCabe, we already had a lot of the cross-examination already on day 15, and now Alan Jackson's continuing and wrapping up his cross-examination on Jennifer McCabe. But first, he comes back to a theme which he discussed already, which he brought out on cross-examination in day 15, and that was the fact that Jennifer McCabe testified that she heard Karen Reed actually confess and admit to an EMT, I hit him. And although in the beginning, she was just saying it in question form. Did I hit him? Could I have hit him? What if I hit him? Those are all questions. But there was no question about it at all that at the scene, Karen Reed said to the EMT or said to Jennifer McCabe within earshot of the EMT or in response to an EMT's question, I hit him, with a period at the end of those sentences. So definitely that was her testimony. And Alan Jackson brought out, isn't it interesting that none of your testimony that you're saying today appears anywhere? It's not in the officer's reports, not in the grand jury testimony. When you were asked 12 different times about what you heard her say, what you heard Karen Reed say, and you didn't say that you heard her say, I hit him. It's very interesting, don't you think? And her response to that was, well, I can't write the reports for the officers. I can only tell them what I heard. So the fact that the officers didn't put this in their reports, number one. And number two is that it wasn't really specifically asked the question of, did you hear her say an admission or something like that? And that's how she got out of some of the cross-examination questions with respect to whether she heard this statement and why she didn't report it before. Either she wasn't asked directly or she did tell it to the officers, but they didn't put it in the report. Now, in fact, what Officer Link did put in his report, and this is something that also Alan Jackson brought out, was you specifically called Officer Link back to the scene after he already spoke to you once. You specifically called him back because you wanted to share more information which could be helpful for his investigation, right? Yes. So you brought him back. You're telling him more details. And in that report, Officer Link writes that you said, Jennifer McCabe, you said that you overheard Karen saying, I hope I didn't hit him. That's what Officer Link put in his report. Now, if you called him back and you said, no, I heard Karen say, I hit him, then his report would say that. And again, her response to that was, I told him that I heard Karen Reed say I hit him, and he just decided not to put that in his report. So what can I do? All right. Now, he brought up the fact that Jennifer McCabe went to visit Elizabeth Proctor, who's Michael Proctor's wife, at their home. So again, this doesn't look good. This doesn't look good if you, Jennifer McCabe, are going to visit Elizabeth Proctor at her home when her husband, Michael Proctor, the trooper Michael Proctor, is the lead investigator in this case. And she went September 2023. That's when this meeting between Jennifer McCabe and Elizabeth Proctor occurred. And he brought this out. And then Alan Jackson made a mistake. Just to show you, even the best attorneys can make mistakes sometimes. It happens to all of us. And I'm sure if he'd have to redo this, he wouldn't do it the way that he did it. And he probably was assuming that he was trying to go for one answer, and he didn't realize how much he opened the door. And this came as a result from him asking a question, why did you go to Elizabeth Proctor's home? And when you open that question, that's a really open-ended question. And therefore, she got into all of the details of the harassment. Now, we did hear that she was harassed before, and that came out during cross-examination. That was going to come out one way or the other. But all the specific details of the harassment Alan Jackson doesn't want the jury to hear all the time. The least that they can hear about that, the better. So we're going to hear, he understands they're going to hear that she was harassed. And there was some harassment going on. But when he opened the door by saying, well, why did you go to Elizabeth Proctor's house? And then she was able to say, well, I was going through a tremendous amount of harassment. And it's important for the jury to understand the different parts of the harassment in order for you to understand why I was going to Elizabeth Proctor's home. So therefore, she started going into detail. And he tried to stop her and say, no, you're not answering my question. Really, that's not really the point of my question. But the judge overruled him and said, no, you opened the door, and now it's fair game. She's allowed to talk about the details of the harassment. So she was talking about the harassment that she went through in all of its detail and glory, which was, some of the parts were very disturbing. So he did try to spin this in a way that would be helpful for his client, which was, again, a great technique and something that right away, when you have a witness that's going against you and saying some really damaging information, you try to spin it in your favor. And he did try to do that, and I think it could have been done a little bit better. And how I was thinking, as soon as he asked that question, I was thinking, oh boy, he doesn't realize what he just did. And as soon as he realized it, he had the same thought, and he tried to spin it. This is kind of how I would have done it. And he did kind of hint to this idea, but I think I would have just said it a little bit more straight out. And if it gets an objection, well, so be it. The jury heard it. And the point that I would make is something that goes the following. She just went into a whole tirade about all the specific harassment that she has, and the jury's supposed to have sympathy for her, right? That's what she's doing. And the response or the follow-up questions could be, well, sounds like you really went through some significant harassment. And isn't that troubling when you know that you're 100% innocent and you're getting harassed by people? When you know you're 100% innocent, isn't that a terrible feeling? It's probably hard to sleep at night with such a feeling like that, by you're getting all this terrible harassment. Well, at least you're not facing charges for crimes that you didn't commit. Imagine if that type of harassment you would be enduring. Wouldn't that be even worse? And of course, everyone will understand that you're talking about Karen Reed, your client, whose your argument's going to be that she's completely innocent and she's being harassed by the state or by the police by charging her with a crime that she didn't commit. Okay, so he did try to bring this out a little bit, saying like, oh yeah, harassment is terrible, isn't it? And the suggestion was kind of there, but I think it could have been brought out a little bit stronger. All right, anyway, moving on. She had, Jennifer McCabe had an interview with Trooper Tully. And Trooper Tully was interviewing her specifically about her relationship with Trooper Proctor, whether there is any sort of relationship there, whether they know each other, are they friends? Are they acquaintances? Are they good friends? As we're hearing in this trial, exactly where you fall in the friendship, whether you're acquaintance or not. So he's specifically interviewing her about her interactions with Trooper Proctor. And there are some phone calls that Jennifer McCabe had with Trooper Proctor after January 29th, 2022. And there's some phone calls going into February, phone calls going into March. And on top of that, she was interviewed by Trooper Proctor right after the murder. So she also met him in person and interviewed with him. And yet, in Trooper Tully's report, he writes in that report that you, Jennifer McCabe, told him that the first time that you ever had any interaction with Michael or Elizabeth Proctor was September 2023, when you went to go visit Elizabeth Proctor. Now that's not true, is it? And her response was, that's not what I said. I actually told him that of course we had some phone calls and that he interviewed me. I never said that. So here we go. We have another trooper, another officer, another police officer who's putting false statements, false facts in the report. We already had Officer Lank, which you're accusing, Jennifer McCabe is accusing of putting in the incorrect information in his report, and now we're having Trooper Tully putting in incorrect information in his report. So the more that you show this, as you know, from the defense's perspective, the more that you show that everything that Jennifer McCabe is testifying to, all the police officers are getting it wrong, that really she's told them all these things. If it's one police officer who got something wrong, and which is not such an important detail in a report, okay, fine. You know, the jury can can swallow that. But when this keeps coming up more and more, and it's important information, that's when the jury can start being a little suspect about what she actually told the troopers and whether the story changed at all. So that's why it's a good point to bring this out by Alan Jackson. All right, then he gets into the Google search. We've all heard about the Google search, and we're probably going to be seeing a lot, and it's going to be very interesting to hear the experts talk about this Google search, whether it was done at 2:27 in the morning or whether it was done at 6 o'clock in the morning. So it's going to be interesting to hear those experts fight it out about that. So he asks her, and it was a very interesting exchange and certainly worthwhile watching to see the exchange between Alan Jackson and Jennifer McCabe about this Google search. And he asked her, he says, if you had to Google how long it would take for an individual to succumb to the elements, if that individual is left outside, what would you search in Google? And she said, I don't know exactly remember what I would put in. She said, all I remember is that your client, Karen Reed, told me to Google hyperthermia and how long does it take to die in the cold. So Alan Jackson pushed back and said, so you're telling me that you don't even know what you put in that Google search? You don't even know what you did? And then she kept saying, well, why don't you show me? Why don't you show me? Do you have a document that shows me what I did? And one thing is very prepared. Okay, I think that's something that any lawyer that was watching this can tell. Jennifer McCabe is smart, and she definitely was prepared for this cross-examination from her for her testimony, and she understands. If you say I'm not 100% sure, I need my recollection refreshed, then they're going to have to show you certain things, and then you can testify based on what you see in the records and not contradict yourself or contradict the records. So she understands that. That's what it seems like. And that's why she's not willing to commit to anything that she's allegedly put in the Google search until she sees documentation of it. And that's why she's pushing back. And Alan Jackson is not just going to roll over and say, okay, well, here's the document. He's trying to push her, and he's trying to say, you're telling me that you don't remember what you put in the Google search? And he said, it's been 2.5 years, and you can't remember what you put in the Google search? You know about this case for 2.5 years. And then she keeps saying, well, why don't you show it to me? And he's like, you literally don't remember? And then he says, well, how about Haas long to die in cold? Does that sound familiar? And her response was, yeah, it's been everywhere. So he says, why does that sound so familiar? And then she wrote, because you put it out on social media. And his response to this was, well, I didn't put anything out on social media because I don't even have social media. And then she says, well, I'm sorry, Turtle Boy did. So Alan Jackson's response to that was, and this is just to win some points with the jury, was that, so if the world happens to know about it, that's not on me, is it? And she wrote, no, I guess not. And here's where some snarkiness and sarcasm comes back, and where he says, I guess not. So just for extra emphasis, he put that in. And of course, I smiled. I apologize. All right. So and then he pushes the issue a little bit further. And he says, is there a reason you don't want to admit putting that Google search in the Safari when you opened up Safari that night? And she said, no, there's no reason. So then he said, so say it. Why don't you just say what you did? And then there's an objection. And okay, he finally pulls up the documents. All right, so he pulls up the documents, the extraction report, the Celebrate report, and he shows that there was 2 searches in the morning. One was done at 6:23 and 51 seconds. And for that, she typed in how long. She actually spelled how right. She spelled long right. And then she wrote TI instead of 2. Die in CLKD. That was her first search at 6:23 in the morning and 51 seconds. And then she did a new search at 6:23 and 57 seconds. Haas long to die in cold. That's the one we're all familiar with. And he said to her, Alan Jackson, he said, you know that when you put in these 2 searches, whether you put in how long TI, die in CLKD, and Haas long to die in cold, the results from both searches are exactly the same. And once she acknowledged that, then he said, so then why did you do two searches? If you get the same results, you already got your result from searching how long TI, DI, and CLKD. Why don't you just leave it? Why did you do another search? That doesn't make any sense. And her response to that was that I can't answer that. I don't know why I did. All I know is that she was screaming in my ear, Karen Reed, and going ballistic and shaking me, and that's perhaps why I did two searches. And by the way, if you watch the direct examination in this for Jennifer McCabe, you got to go back a few days to see that. But you could tell that she was anticipating this line of questioning, and somebody prepared her for this. That's what it seems like from me as a lawyer's perspective, because she already said something about this when she was on direct examination, where it's much less confrontational. It's much more friendly. And she was just being asked by the prosecutor, well, what did you do when you were sitting with Karen Reed? Did she ask you to Google search anything, right? And she said, yeah, I Google searched something, and I may have even searched it twice because she was driving me crazy. She knew that. And that's why she said that back then in direct examination, and that's why it's not as strong by cross-examination to say, you Google, you searched it twice. It's going to be brought out on cross-examination, but at least you already acknowledged it in direct examination. You already anticipated, like we always talk about. You anticipate, you talk to the jury, you explain it firsthand when it's not confrontational, and then when you explain it again, it's not going to be as bad. So that was another way that we were able to determine that she was really prepared for this testimony, which she should be, by the way. There's nothing wrong with that. All right. So then Alan Jackson shows her that at 2:27, according to a Celebrite report, the extraction report, at 2:27 a.m., there was a search for Haas Long to die in cold. So that was done at 2:27 in the morning. And that search was deleted from your phone, Jennifer McCabe. So here he is, Alan Jackson, on cross-examination. You've got this 2:27 a.m. search, which at that time officially you don't know anything, right? You just came home from the party. You're looking up basketball stuff for your kids, and you don't know anything. And how is it possible that you're searching Haas Long to die in the cold? And this is obviously a very important part of this case. And she says, I didn't search it then. I did not search at 2:27 in the morning. And I don't even know how to delete Google searches. And Alan Jackson said, and this is how he conducted his cross-examination because you don't really care about what the witness answers. He says, the reason you searched twice in the morning was because you had to overwrite your search at 2:27 in the morning. You know that you did a search at 2:27 in the morning. And you know that that's incriminating. And therefore, what you did was you wanted to mimic the same exact search that you did at 2:27 in the morning. You wanted to mimic that search and do the exact same search at 6:23 in the morning, whenever it was, when you're with Karen. And then you'll be able to say that that's what Karen told you to do. And that is why you did two Google searches. Well, why would you need to do two Google searches? For the simple reason, because the first time that you did the Google search, you didn't exactly spell it the same way that you did at 2:27 in the morning. What you did on 6:23 in the morning is you wrote how long TI die in CLKD. That was not the exact words that you used to search at 2:27 in the morning. And at 6:23, the next search that you did was the exact same wording that you used to search at 2:27. And that's why you did that. And that's what he said to her. And she said, of course, that's not true. I never searched anything, and I didn't delete anything. And that was it. That was the end of the cross-examination. So now Mr. Lally on redirect could have his hands full because he has to now redirect everything that was brought on cross-examination, which was hours and hours of worth of cross-examination. But he didn't do that, which is smart. You don't rehash everything. So number one he brought out was that on this app, Life 360, he asked her, is it always accurate to exactly where the girls are? That you can always track exactly where they are? Is it always accurate? And her answer was, of course not. And then this is where we're starting to see what the prosecution's case is going to be and what their argument is going to be about this search coming up that allegedly she did at 2:27 in the morning, because that's really incriminating. That's pretty bad. So what he did was he asked her. He said, when you searched for basketball, and remember, her testimony was that when she came home after the party, she went up to bed and she was searching different basketball stuff. She's a basketball coach. Her daughters play basketball, and she was looking up some basketball stuff. And he asked her, did you leave that tab open after you were done searching for basketball? And she said, yes. And then when you searched at 6 a.m., when Karen Reed asked you to search at 6 a.m., did you open a new tab, or did you use that same tab that you were searching basketball? Did you just type in on that tab this new Google search? And she said that she typed in that same tab, which would seem to suggest that the prosecution's case here, and maybe their expert is going to testify to this, is that if you do a search at 2:27 in the morning for a different topic, and then you use that same tab hours later to search something else, then it's possible that the extraction report will report your later search, which in this case would be how long to die, or how long to die in the cold, and will record it as the time earlier when that tab was first opened. And that's what seems to be what the prosecution is going to argue about that 2:27 a.m. search. All right. Now, it also came out on redirect that she used to be a 5th grade teacher. I'm not sure why that was brought out, but he did bring that out. And then he was also asking her about the different stories that Karen Reed was telling her, Jennifer McCabe, about what happened to John O'Keefe. And here was very interesting. I found this a little interesting, because he asked her the different types of stories. And first, Jennifer McCabe said that Karen Reed kept changing the story. First, she said that I left him at the waterfall, and then she said, I don't remember going to 34 Fairview. And then she said the following, which from my recollection did not come out in the direct examination or the cross-examination. And she said then her story changed to maybe a plow hit him. Now we're going to see that came from Carrie Roberts. From Jennifer McCabe's direct examination, you can go back and look. And from the cross-examination, I never heard that Jennifer McCabe said that one of the stories that Karen Reed said or suggested was that John O'Keefe was hit by a plow. And all of a sudden, it's coming out on redirect. So it almost seems like she forgot about it. She forgot to mention that part. And now on redirect, it's opening up that door. Whether there was communication between Karen Reed and the prosecution about forgetting to mention that part, I don't know. But I thought it was a little interesting that all of a sudden it's coming out on redirect. All right. Now, in June 2023, which is, we know, the federal grand jury testimony that Jennifer McCabe gave, in that testimony, she did say that Karen told her, I hit him. And then he also talks about how you consented to have your phone downloaded, right? If you really are part of this conspiracy, then you would not want your phone downloaded. You wouldn't be so willing to turn over your phone to have it downloaded, right? And so he brought that part out. He also brought that part out about Carrie Roberts also handing over her phone without any restrictions. Go ahead and download it with whatever you want. And with respect to the timelines, remember they got together and they were writing timelines, and the question was, why in the world would they get together? Again, Jennifer McCabe and the Alberts, why would they all get together to figure out their timelines if this is not a conspiracy? What do you need timelines for to figure out where so her explanation was, well, we were all trying to figure out what happened with John O'Keefe. I mean, it's not that complicated. You were all at the waterfall, and then he didn't show up, and then he ends up dead. What do you have to get together to put together timelines for? Now, her redirect, she explains that actually the reason why they got together to put together timelines was because Peggy O'Keefe, John's mother, suggested that they all get together and write a timeline so it will be clear by trial. So that was her response, and that's a little more palatable for the jury to swallow. That's why they got together with their timelines. Now, remember that it was brought out that Jennifer McCabe overheard something that Carrie Roberts said to one of the police, one of the troopers, and it prompted Jennifer McCabe to text in the group chat between her and the Alberts and Matt McCabe. She's telling them everything in all caps. And this was brought out in cross-examination. What exactly were you talking? What do you mean she's telling them everything? And at one point, it was brought out in cross-examination that she didn't really, at one point, she didn't know, and all of a sudden, during trial, she remembered, okay, that was a point that we discussed already. But she remembered what it was, and she said that she was so horrified by what was said. And that's why she wrote, she's telling them everything. So on redirect, Jennifer McCabe was asked, well, what did you hear Carrie say that was so horrifying? And the defense objected to this. And I think it may have actually played out in their favor. And I can hear arguments both ways. But here is where Carrie said, this is what Carrie said to the trooper, which Jennifer McCabe overheard. Carrie said, John really loved Amy. And in my eyes, Karen was just a babysitter with benefits. So, if you're the defense, do you want that information coming out or not? On the one hand, it can make Karen look like she can feel this also, that John doesn't really love her, and that she's a babysitter with benefits. And that's why maybe she would carry out this murder. So maybe that's why, as a defense, you don't want the jury hearing that. But on the other hand, you also can get some sympathy for Karen. That here you have this John O'Keefe, and he doesn't really love her. He's just using her as a babysitter, essentially, with benefits. And really, he's in love with other women. So it can actually swing the other way to the defense's side. So the defense objected to it. It still came in. And what the jury thinks about it, I'm not sure. Whether it's going to make a difference or not, I don't know either. All right. Well, continuing. He also discussed about the harassment that was ongoing. And she said that the harassment was daily, sometimes hourly. And it was just the amount of harassment, the details of the harassment were really crazy. And it was just torture, she called it. All right. So then there was some recross. And on recross, he said, when did the harassment begin? The harassment began in April of 2023, and that's when the Google search came out that you did at 2:27 in the morning. That's when the harassment began, right? And isn't it interesting that 2 months after it came out that you did a Google search at 2:27 in the morning, and all of a sudden you're getting all this harassment? Isn't it interesting that 2 months later is the first time that you testified under oath that Karen Reed said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him? Isn't that some sort of coincidence? So that's what he brought out on cross-examination. Now, also he said that although you handed over your phone, which the prosecution wanted to make a point of, that you had no problem handing over your phone to the police and letting them do a full download of your phone without any restrictions, they did allow you to delete certain conversations with your daughters, right? Including conversations with Allie McCabe, who picked up Colin Albert that night, right? And she said, well, yeah, I deleted all the conversations that I had with my daughters because they're all private, but nothing to do with Allie McCabe's alleged involvement in this case. And at that time, she was not even a witness or anything, and therefore, I had no reason to have any ill intentions by doing that. And also another part is that let's think about this statement that Jennifer McCabe heard Carrie Roberts say about what she felt, Carrie Roberts felt, the relationship between John O'Keefe and Karen Reed was, that it was just a babysitter with benefits. Now, I understand why Alan Jackson didn't want to open this up and say, is that really horrifying? Is that a horrifying thing to say? Maybe it's something that you wouldn't say, but does it really horrify you? Have you never heard such a comment about how certain people are friends with benefits or certain people are being used by other people? Like it's a comment that you can live with. It doesn't keep you up at night, right? Now, he didn't want to open this, obviously, because she can, it could be a trap. Because then he can go into, and then she'd say, yes, I believe that is horrifying because I'm an ethical and moral person. And to say that about John or to say that about Karen is just terrible and it's horrifying. I don't think horrifying is the right word for it. But again, you're going to be playing with semantics here, and it's probably not worth opening up. But he did, it almost sounded like, if you're watching this, it almost sounded like Alan Jackson wanted to do something with this, that you're saying, oh, you were so horrified by this. And he just knew that it wasn't going to be a good line to open up. But I think it's just something worthwhile thinking about, that this type of comment made by Carrie Roberts, how she feels about another person's relationship. I mean, people think all types of things about other people's relationships. So it's not like such a terribly horrifying thing. It's not like he's abusing her. It's not like, something like that. So to say that that was horrifying, but he wanted to point out that that was the horrifying thing that you had to write in the text message, that in the text message, she's telling him everything. And what's everything? Like, that's not a detail. That's just a feeling. Oh my gosh, she's telling him everything. She's telling him everything. Do you agree with that? I'm not sure if Jennifer McCabe would agree with that. So is that like a detail, a fact that, oh my gosh, she's telling him everything? Or is that like, oh, she's telling him her feelings? Or you can't believe what type of thing she's saying? I don't know if the way to describe that specific feeling that Carrie Roberts has about John O'Keefe and Karen Reed's relationship would be considered, oh my gosh, she's telling him everything. I'm not sure if that's how you would explain that. All right. And also, he said, you didn't put in the text messages how horrified you were. You didn't say, oh my gosh, I can't believe what you just said. You didn't say that. You didn't say that you were horrified. And her response to that was, yeah, because we spoke about it. So I didn't have to put in the text message. We spoke about it. All right. And then also it came out that Jennifer McCabe, while Alan Jackson was talking about, well, you drove to 34 Fairview to look for John O'Keefe, right? That's why you drove there together with Karen Reed. So the fact that you didn't see John O'Keefe doesn't mean you're supposed to be looking for John O'Keefe. So the fact that Karen Reed saw John O'Keefe and you happened to not see him, but you were the point of going there was to look for him. So she saw him. And Jennifer McCabe tried to explain how it was impossible in her mind that Karen Reed actually saw John O'Keefe's body. And she said, well, her face was all the way between Carrie and me because they were in the front seat and Karen was in the back seat, and she was texting at the same time. So and she was acting completely hysterical. I don't understand how she would have seen John O'Keefe's body. And therefore it must be that she knew that his body was there because she put it there. That's essentially what she said. All right. Now let's move on to Carrie Roberts. So Carrie Roberts, she was also called by Karen Reed, and a lot of this very similar testimony that we heard already before, that Karen Reed was screaming, Carrie, 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 John's dead. Now she did say John's dead in that first phone call before they even discovered him. And then she changed it to saying, I'm afraid John might be dead. And then she said he might have gotten hit by a plow because he did not come home last night. And to explain this, Karen Reed said, I was not even supposed to stay in Canton last night. So since I was not supposed to stay there, there's no way that John O'Keefe would not come home to his two kids. And Kaylee was there. Patrick had a sleepover. But he would never leave Kaylee alone. And the plan that night was not for me to come home with him. I was not supposed to stay in Canton that night. And therefore, I think that something happened. So she called back. At some point, that was one conversation. And then Karen Reed called Carrie Roberts back and said that she was driving, and she asked if she can drive over to Carrie's house, and Carrie can then drive because she's not really in a state that she can drive. And she said, I don't remember anything from last night because we drank so much. And then Carrie responded to that and said, no, you really need to go home to be with Kaylee. You can't leave Kaylee by herself. If she's there by herself, you stay at home. I'll go look for John. And then she said, no. Karen Reed said, no, I'm coming to your house, and you need to be able to drive me with my car or your car. And Carrie said, fine. Now, Carrie's husband tells Carrie, you're not going anywhere in this blizzard. There's a blizzard outside. It's the middle of the night. You're not going anywhere. And Carrie responded, yes, I am. Our good friend, John O'Keefe, is missing. I'm absolutely going somewhere. And she sat in her car waiting for 10 minutes because she assumed that Karen was coming over. So she scraped off her car, got her car all ready, got it heated, and waiting for Karen to come over, and Karen never came. So then Karen called back Carrie Roberts, and she said, well, she went to Jennifer McCabe's house. And then Carrie eventually said, okay, I'm going to come to Jennifer McCabe's house. Carrie came to Jennifer McCabe's house, and then they decided at that point, and it seems from Carrie Roberts that this was Carrie's idea, that we should go back to John O'Keefe's house and search. Maybe he passed out somewhere in the house. Because they asked Karen, did you look around the house? And Karen said, no, I didn't look around the house. So they went back to John O'Keefe's house together. And Carrie drove in one car, and Karen and Jennifer McCabe driving Karen's car, her Lexus SUV, went back to John O'Keefe's car. All right. And she did overhear in the phone call. Now, this is because Carrie Roberts was on the phone with Jennifer McCabe and Karen Reed when they were driving back to John O'Keefe's house. She did overhear Karen telling Jennifer that she left him at the waterfall. Again, that she left John O'Keefe at the waterfall. And then Jennifer McCabe said, no, you came to the 34 Fairview. Remember that? And then she said, yeah, but what about, and then she said also, what about my taillight? What about her taillight being broken? This is what Karen Reed said back to Jennifer McCabe, and Carrie Roberts is overhearing the conversation because she was on the phone with them as she was driving together in tandem back to John O'Keefe's house. So there again, we hear some comment from Karen Reed saying that she understands and is acknowledging that her taillight is broken already. Now, Carrie did say that she saw a little black hole in the taillight on Karen's SUV. So this is Carrie's testimony. She did see it broken, but she described it as a little black hole, which I thought was interesting. And because later in the testimony, the prosecutor showed a picture of Karen Reed's taillight, which is not just a small little black hole. The whole half of it is missing. And she said, Carrie Roberts said that that's exactly how it looked to her when she saw it. Now, that's not exactly how you would describe a little black hole, right? All right, so I thought that was just interesting. Now, they went back to John's house, John O'Keefe's house, and again, Carrie Roberts was asked on the stand, what was John like in terms of how neat he kept his house? And he said, yeah, John was a neat freak. And everybody knew that when you go into his house, you take off your shoes. That's what everybody knew. And they brought out the fact that Carrie Roberts and Jennifer McCabe took off their shoes as soon as they came into John O'Keefe's house because they knew the rule. And Karen Reed just walked right in. Now, this keeps coming up. And what's the idea here? Why do they keep saying and bringing out that Karen Reed just walked straight into the house, didn't take off her shoes, like she doesn't care about the rules in this house, and she knows that John O'Keefe's a neat freak, and she doesn't care, like shows some sort of callousness on Karen Reed's part. But on the other hand, we understand that Karen Reed was completely hysterical. Do you think an hysterical person is going to start saying, wait, you know what, I should take my shoes off because that's what we always do here? She's going hysterical. So, of course, she's not going to take her shoes off. So, that's just probably the argument that the defense can make back to this. But they keep bringing out this point that Karen Reed didn't take off her shoes when she went into John O'Keefe's house, even though she's in the middle of a breakdown, what seems like. All right. So, Karen and Jen go upstairs. Carrie looks downstairs. And then she went up and she saw Karen standing in John's room. John's bed was made, as the testimony has been already also. And then she said, okay, now let's go to, let's leave the house. We'll go to 34 Fairview. So they're driving down 34 Fairview. This is Carrie Roberts now saying over the story. And Karen Reed says, there he is, let me out. Actually, she says, let me the F out of this car. And she started kicking the door to get out. Now, Carrie Roberts testified that she looked over there and she didn't see anything. And that was Jennifer McCabe's testimony also. She looked over where Karen Reed was pointing and they didn't see anything. And she said that she opened the door, she looked over at Jen and said, sheesh, Karen Reed's crazy. She opened the door. Karen ran over to a mound of snow. First, she describes this as a mound of snow. And then, at some point, Carrie Roberts says, then I realized that it did look like the shape of a body. Now, this is when Carrie Roberts, according to her testimony, seems to have still be in the car. So if she was looking carefully, it did seem from her testimony that she did see the shape of a body after Karen Reed ran over and was hovering over the body. So it wasn't just a mound of snow. When Carrie Roberts looked closely and when Karen Reed was running over to the body, it did take the form of a body. So I'm sure that's something that the defense can bring up as well. So what Carrie Roberts did is that she dug his head out of the snow. He had blood coming out of his nose. He was bleeding in the back of his head, and he had a golf ball in his right eye with that bruise. She started doing chest compressions. Karen was giving mouth to mouth. And Karen kept saying, did I hit him? Did I hit him? Did I hit him? Is he dead? Is he dead? As we keep hearing. And she also testified that no neighbors came out of their house that night. And this is, again, by the prosecution, some way to show that, I guess, a reason why Brian Albert did not come out of his house. Because, after all, no neighbors came out of their house at 5 o'clock in the morning in the middle of a blizzard, and therefore it's understandable that Brian and Nicole Albert did not come out of their house either. But, again, it's obviously very different when there is all this action in front of your house. But they keep bringing that point out also. She also said that his phone was under him, and this is what her testimony was, it was grass, sounding like that right by his phone, right? The phone was underneath John O'Keefe's body, and there was grass underneath that, which would seem to suggest that he was there for a long time. Then they held hands at some point in a car, Carrie Roberts, Karen Reed, and Jennifer McCabe, and they prayed, and Karen Reed realized that she had blood on her hands, and then she said that she had a period, and then they said, no, that's not your blood, that's John's blood. I'm not sure what the suggestion there was, that the blood on her hands was from her period. I don't know, but that's what she said. And as they were leaving the scene, Karen Reed says to Carrie Roberts that if anything happens to John, I'm going to kill myself. You need to take care of these kids. And then we know that they went back to the scene because Karen Reed had to be taken to the hospital to make sure that she's not going to harm herself. And she kept calling Carrie in the hospital, on the way to the hospital, if she knows anything, and is John O'Keefe dead or not. And she called at least 10 times. 10 times, is he dead, is he dead, is he dead? Always just kept calling Carrie back. All right, that was Carrie Roberts' testimony. Then we got on to Laura Sullivan. Who is Laura Sullivan? Well, Laura Sullivan is someone who was very close friends with John O'Keefe. How did the friendship come about? That John O'Keefe's good friend, very good friend, best friend, Pat Rogers, dated Laura Sullivan. And they had a child together. And at some point, Pat Rogers died. And it seems that he harmed himself. And from that time on, John kept in very close contact with Laura Sullivan. And when when Laura Sullivan eventually had that child, she asked John to be the godfather, and the relationship, the friendship, was very close. And Laura Sullivan would get these rooms available in Aruba through timeshares, and she would sell them to different people. And at some point, John asked to have a room in Aruba. So here we're going to get the whole Aruba incident. And something also that came out, which was interesting, is that Karen spoke to Laura Sullivan about the rooms, and she said that she needed a separate room. So they couldn't just have one room. They needed 2 rooms. Because Karen said she needed her own room and her own bathroom. And Laura Sullivan said, fine, I'll put you in touch with the people. She put them in touch with some people that had 2 rooms there, and eventually they did get the 2 rooms, albeit they were on opposite sides of the hotel. And at one point they went out together, she said, and there seemed to be a pretty big group that got together for dinner one night, and Karen actually offered and did pay for the bill for the entire night. So she was very generous in that way, paying for the bill of everybody who went out that night to eat together. And then we have this story about John O'Keefe hugging Laura Sullivan's sister. So Laura Sullivan's sister is Marietta, and she's 10 years younger than Laura Sullivan. And at some point, again, as Marietta testified also, that John O'Keefe was like an older brother to her. And at some point, there were some words spoken and exchanged between Marietta and Karen after that incident, because Karen seemed to think that John was making out with her, and really John was just giving her a hug, a friendly hug, like an older brother hug. And she did see, this is Laura Sullivan testifying, she did see after that incident, some phone calls and texts from Karen and asking John, do you need to take those calls? And John's response here was, yes, she's crazy. So showing that John was getting fed up with how crazy Karen was making him. And also, the next day, John O'Keefe said to Laura Sullivan, apparently, I made out with your sister the other night, according to Karen, showing that what the fight was all about. And when Laura Sullivan found out from her sister, she found out that was not what happened at all. And the next time that she saw John, John seemed to be unhappy, despondent, a little depressed, and it seems to be that he was unhappy about his relationship with Karen Reed. And that was the suggestion there. And Laura Sullivan was saying life is too short to be upset. And do you want to speak about it? Do you want to talk about it with me? Do you want to talk about your relationship with Karen with me? And we'll talk. And he was not interested in talking. Later, Karen came to Laura Sullivan. It seems that Karen and John made up at some point, or they had a discussion or disagreement or fight about this. And Karen came over to Laura and said that she's sorry about what happened, and she'd like to. And this is what she said, actually. She said that I thought I saw something that I didn't, which means that she's acknowledging that really John was not making out with Marietta Sullivan, and they were just giving a friendly hug. And because of that, she'd like to pay for some of her sister's room. So again, it seems that when Karen Reed feels bad, she wants to help by paying. She's of financial means, it seems like, and therefore she wants to help. She pays for dinner, and that's a way that she can make up with people, apparently. Okay, so that was essentially Laura Sullivan's testimony. The cross-examination was, were you at 34 Fairview on January 28th, 29th, 30th, any of that time? No. Okay, but Trooper Proctor still interviewed you later in February. For some reason, he wanted to interview you, even though you had nothing to do with the actual days. You weren't around at the waterfall. You weren't around at the time at 34 Fairview. And that was essentially the cross-examination of both Laura Sullivan and Marietta Sullivan. And Marietta Sullivan took the stand that basically said very similar information, that at some point John was hugging her, and Karen Reed came out very upset. She must have seen them, and she screamed across the entire hotel room, who the F was that, and getting very upset. And Marietta said, well, I said, nice to meet you, like trying to diffuse the situation and explain it. And Karen Reed said something like F you, and then she said F you back, and it wasn't exactly a pleasant conversation. But as we heard from Laura Sullivan, it seems that Karen Reed spoke to John about it and got the real story, and then she wanted to make up with Marietta about it. All right, well, that was the extent of what happened in day 16. There's going to be no trial tomorrow on Thursday, and we're going to pick it up again on Friday with a full day of trial, which I think is going to be Brian Higgins, which is going to be very interesting. So that will be it for now. Please, if you haven't subscribe, and we will see you next time.